G'day, it's Adam here again with another quick instant movie review for you. So tonight I caught something a little bit different. I caught a documentary called Oleg, the Oleg Vitov story. Now, if you don't know who Oleg Vitov is, you know, you might be in good company, but I will tell you that in the 1960s, he was regarded as one of the biggest stars in the Soviet Union. He starred in over 50 films beginning in 1961. He was born in communist Russia to a school teacher, and at the age of 25, Oleg, as I mentioned, became one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated actors. He was classed as like the James Dean or the Robert Redford of his time, kind of like the Ryan Gosling, I suppose you could run with now, the Leonardo DiCaprio. But no matter what amount of fame he had, nothing could save him from the political system that really controlled his life, his and many other artists. He even got married to the general secretary at the time and still wound up on the blacklist and was threatened with death and basically had no other means of doing anything except for defecting to the West. And there he tried to reinvent himself in Hollywood, and as much as he could, he still had efforts of basically, you know, anti-Russian stereotypes were being thrown at him. And then he was attacked by the same forces that ruined his career decades earlier. So interesting, this guy. I mean, he had a hell of a life. He got to the point where he finally got recognition for his work and for what he could do as a dramatic actor within Hollywood, starring in such films as Red Heat opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger, but still the stereotypes were still there. And he decided to reinvent himself again by basically getting some of these amazing Russian animations and starting his own animation house, getting all these animations. But even then, the Russian government tried to then get back the rights for these animations that he spent so many hours and so much time recreating and retelling these stories, and had some amazing American actors do the voice works on these animations. So much interesting stuff. This guy's life was amazing. So this is directed by Nadia Tass. Now, Australian director Nadia Tass has done things such as The Big Steal, Malcolm, so some of her big films from the 80s and very early 90s. She was also ushered across to Hollywood to make the very funny film, I thought anyway, Pure Luck, starring Danny Glover and Martin Short. That was her big sort of Hollywood film after really breaking out in Australia with her two big features. So Nadia's made a heap of different films over the years, and this is her first drama documentary style film. She's won a ton of awards, and this one has been very highly recognised at many film festivals, including Toronto. So what's this like? Well, it's also narrated by Brian Cox. Yes, the bloke from Succession does the voiceover work for this, and obviously you know Brian Cox as well from the Bourne movies. Great actor and a really present voice work. You can tell straight away that it is Brian Cox who's doing the voice work in this. Look, this is such an interesting documentary. The story itself is quite phenomenal. I had no idea who Oleg Vitov was before I saw this documentary. And obviously in Russia, he was quite a massive presence in that early 60s to 70s time. I think the interesting thing about this is such a snapshot in time about communism within the Soviet Union at the time, and like just how controlling that government was, with the communist regime, and how it was more about wanting to build this system rather than harness the well-being of the artists within it. At no point did really people get considered more that the political system was the thing that needed control, I guess, the cogs in the machine that made up their system. So fascinating, that all on its own, and just how stifled these artists really felt. some just complied and made, huge propaganda films. And Oleg, to a point, did that as well, but really felt like he was made for more than that. So hence why he tried everything he could to get out of the Soviet Union. And as much as it pained him, he made a dramatic escape. And this is, outside of everything, you think about these Cold War, spy films about defections and getting Russians out and so on and so forth. This really plays a lot like those films, where he got out in the 1970s, early 80s to the West, and just how that came about is absolutely nail-biting stuff. So this film uses some interesting techniques. The director Nadia Tass uses not only real footage and photos as well as clips from his movies to help sort of tell the tale. She also has a huge amount of interviews from all sorts of different people: writers, directors, friends, family members, people who are had an association with Oleg or have been scholars of his work. So this has some really interesting viewpoints that kind of drives the narrative of the story forward all along the way, with this great voiceover from Brian Cox. So it's very interesting from that point of view. This, in some respects, would be a story that I would love to see turned into a feature film, because it is nail-biting. It's kind of like a spy thriller. So lots of different techniques are used by the director to flesh out this documentary, this very interesting story. And to a point, you can see the director's narrative tendencies to sort of want to tell the story almost as a narrative style, whilst interjecting these interviews and so on and so forth. But I would throw caution to the wind and say, okay, this is a documentary. Now what you really need is to make a feature film about this guy's life, because it is an extraordinary story, and it's not something that we're going to easily grasp onto as a Western society to find out about the life of this guy. It really plays a bit like a John le Carré novel, for them to have to do these most dramatic things to get out of that system, and then try and find some acceptance in the Western society. So fascinating, and almost like almost like just a full-on racism, really, in the West, for, okay, you're going to play a bad guy because you're Russian, especially during the 1980s, so his amazing ability to really buck that stereotype and finally get some recognition as an artist, not as a Russian defector, but as an artist with some great acting, very charismatic. I mean, the guy looks so handsome. Even in his later days, he looks, he's probably looks even more handsome, to be honest. But this is a really interesting story. Outside of the documentary itself, there's a few things that I would probably change myself, but and it was a little heavy on some interview bits and pieces, but the use of the of Oleg kind of talking through his story, as well as the interviews, as well as Brian Cox's narration, we've got a lot of things at play here. The Oleg Vitov story, I would probably give a good 7.5 out of 10. For me, it's the story of this guy that is essential. I'd say the structure of the documentary could possibly have changed and altered a little bit, and probably get a little bit more cohesive, but it is a big story to tell, and something I'd love to see as an actual as a film, as a narrative film, retold, this true story. I'd love to see that, get some good actors involved, and I think you'd have a huge hit on your hands, because it is a phenomenal story. So if you can, check it out. It's called Oleg, the Oleg Vitov story. It is being streamed on a few platforms throughout Australia. There's some links down in the description below and details of where you can see it. But if you get a chance, do catch it. because it is a really interesting documentary. All right, that is it for me for tonight. Have a great night, and I will catch you all next time here in my car. I might go and have like some sort of stroganoff or something. We'll drink some vodka. Better idea. All right, good night.